beautiful people. Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to the International Women's Day event organized by Nigerian Union Sweden in collaboration with Afro-Sven Ghana's Risk Organisation. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes.
Okay, now my mic is working. Okay. So now if you speak English, I bid you welcome. If you speak Swedish, I would say welcome. And if somehow you speak French, je veux dire bienvenue, ça me fait grand plaisir de vous voir aujourd'hui. And if you're Yoruba, Ekabo, Chidadalede, if you happen to come from the northern part of Nigeria, then I will say Sandezua. If you are Igbo, no. If you happen to speak Swahili, does anyone speak Swahili here? Okay, what would I say? If you happen to speak Swahili, I would say Karibo. I hope I pronounced that right. And if you happen to speak Lingala, I would say Boye Malamo. And all I am trying to say is, you are all welcome here. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that we would have a wonderful time together today. My name is Alleluia Afon, and I am absolutely honored and equally excited to be moderating the events for today. So I'm a Yoruba girl from Nigeria, and where I come from, we have this saying that Karin Kapo Yeni Yeni, meaning that if we're a lot who work together, it's befitting and it's beautiful for us to see. So I'm not going to be moderating the event for today alone. I'm going to be doing it with some amazing women whom we will get to meet shortly. So to kickstart this event, I will be calling on Dr. Mrs. Angela Bello Adagbo as she takes the welcome address. Please give her a round of applause.
So my maternal grandmother had a set of twins, a boy and a girl, among 6 other children. Mama was a paradigm of an empowered woman who worked tirelessly both day and night to support my grandfather in providing for their children. So life happened and she was robbed, and everything she had invested in a trade was taken away. At about the same time, a set of twins were supposed to proceed their education into the secondary level, and a choice had to be made due to the very tight financial situation of the family at the time. Should the boy be allowed to get a formal education, or should the girl be given the opportunity of a formal education? Both kids were intelligent and they loved to be educated. Somehow the family would succumb to societal pressure, and it was decided that the girl should go learn a trade because after all she was a girl, and the boy should be given the opportunity of a formal education. Mama loved both kids equally, and both kids loved education. Mama's little girl, my own mother, was about 11 at the time, and her childhood dream was to become a nurse. She was disappointed by the decision, but somehow she was understanding. She knew Mama meant well, and she knew she was loved. She would later learn a trade in dressmaking and fashion designing, and she later became empowered, and she had the opportunity of empowering so many women. She still does. She is soon 71. I personally feel that it would have been fair to explain to a little girl of about 11 that the only reason why she couldn't get the education that she so dearly desired was because of the very tight financial situation of the family at the time, and not just because she was a girl. So in the spirit of fairness, I would like to welcome you all to today's event. My name is Angela Bello Adagbo, and I bring you greetings from Nigerian Union Sweden and Afrosvenska Riskföreningen. NUS and ASR are particularly honored and delighted by your response to this clarion call, a call to join in the global emancipation for the recognition and appreciation of women, a call to lend our voices to women all over the world, and most especially to women in our own community, who from all indications have got voices, but haven't yet discovered means of making their voices heard. We are gathered today as sisters to celebrate ourselves. We have decided to gather to celebrate a host of women by whose testimonies we have been able to face our own fears and overcome so many insurmountables. We are gathered as a community and as a family to share our experiences and perhaps be the very reason why a sister or even a brother would choose to go an extra mile in the fight for freedom. A lot has indeed been achieved in the fight for women's liberation and empowerment of women, but this is still a work in progress. It is still very common that women are still being saddled with the burden of self-deprioritization and relegation of their own achievements into secondary status. This on its own isn't all negative, as it were, but women should also realize that the matter. In the words of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, women should realize that the matter and the matter equally. I am a daughter, a sister, a mother, and a wife, but most importantly, I am human, and so are we all. We as Africans, we've been conditioned to think that the concept of women liberation and empowerment is sort of foreign to us as Africans. But the truth is, women liberation and empowerment of women is an integral part of us as a society. And all we have to do is just to reignite the flames and keep the fire burning. I guess the time to straighten out and fly right is now. Once again, I want to welcome you all to today's event, and I really do hope that we'll all have a nice time learning from each other. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Our apologies to our ladies representatives in the building, because I believe you were not able to answer the second question, because it says, what does gender equity mean to you as a woman? We should have couched that better to say, what does gender equity mean to you? So our apologies for that. So now I would be introducing the panelists, so we can delve right into the panel discussion. The very first panelist on my list is a multi-award winning travel photographer, author, and keynote speaker, Mrs. Lola Akimade Okestrom. Her work has appeared in different international media brands like the National Geographic, BBC, CNN, The Guardian, to mention a few. Born in Nigeria, educated in the United States, and now based in Sweden. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mrs. Lola Akimade Okestrom. Our next panelist is I'm very sure dear to the heart of every individual seated here, because one way or another we are all a product of teachers. Our next panelist is an experienced and enthusiastic educator with love for educating teenagers. Currently, she teaches the 7th to the 9th grade at Nim Shopping's Hook Stadium, and she has an early career in education and social work, involved in supporting newly arrived pupils and unaccompanied refugee minors' integration into Swedish schools and the society. She is passionate about social justice and empowering young adults to become lifelong learners. Please put your hands together for Mrs. Okweyemi Amadasun. Our final panelist for today is one of the founding members of Afrosvenskarnas Riskorganisation, and that should tell you that she's a social activist and she's passionate about working for equality and equal rights for people of African descent living in Sweden. She's not only that, she's also a published author and a mother of 4. Her most recent book, which is right over there in that corner, Zawako. It's not just a set of stories or a thrilling story, but it's also a social documentation and commentary of an African reality that actually transcends beyond Africa. Please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mrs. Janet Sabuni. And finally, to moderate this panel discussion, I would be handing over to Dr. Mrs. Angela Belu Adagbon. Thank you very much.
Yes, I know a lot of people might be wondering why the celebration of African women, and what has celebration of African women got to do with embracing equity. Naturally, it is believed that celebration helps to foster a sense of gratitude as it reminds us of our different milestones. Celebration helps to create a sense of community as it reminds us of the fact that we are never alone. When we celebrate the past, we have the opportunity of reflecting on the present, and this naturally helps to build a positive kind of energy that propels us into striving to attain more in the future. In the words of Bernardine Evaristus, she says, and I quote, "Women, young women should be full of themselves so as to get enough of empowerment that helps them to attain their goals." Now, this has nothing to do with proclaiming to the world that we have arrived. It has nothing to do with proclaiming to ourselves that we are already made. Rather, it is a way of coming together, encouraging ourselves, inspiring ourselves, so as to get enough positivity that will help us to attain more and to become better in the future. Yes, we'll be kicking off this roundtable discussion by peeling back the layers of our lives to talk about those women we had as role models while we were growing up. Women that were sort of influential in, helping to shape us into who we are today. So I'll be starting with you, Okweyemi. I would like you to talk about the female role models you had, or role models you had while growing up, and how you were influenced by these persons.
All right, thank you. Is it on? It is. Yes, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So for me, I would say that my mom is the very first role model that I had growing up. And and I found, at some point, I just had a reflection, and it occurred to me that most of the decisions that I made as a young girl were greatly influenced by her. So, I mean, if you look at who a role model is someone whom other people can look up to, whose behavior can be learned. You could emulate their behaviors and, emulate their values, their attributes and, characteristics. So my mom is one who is strong-willed, very determined. In her books, there is nothing as impossibilities. So, and for me, today, I also feel that nothing is impossible. I may not know how to do it. It may not be easy, but it is doable. I just need to find out. It might take me time. It might take even forever to find out, but I strongly believe that everything is achievable. As long as someone has done it or someone has done something similar, I can always do it. And I know that our determination is also from a place of proving to the world that she can be successful. So similar to your mom, her father was also not going to send her to school, so she was almost not going to get an education, and that was because she's a girl child, and unfortunately at the time she was the only child. So, so when the conversation came up, there's no point sending you to school. I mean, you will eventually end up in the kitchen, and by grade 6 you will be pregnant, so there's no point. It's just a waste of resources. And then she had to face the situation headstrong, try to convince him that you do not have any other child to send to school. Shame on you if you do not send me. And of course she won that argument, and then she needed to prove to everyone that, she was going to keep herself, she was going to be successful, and eventually she became the first girl child to have education in that community.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that, so being around the house, listening to her all of the time, and so she would say things like, and by the way, when she had me, she was in the university, and she's in her 70s, by the way, so she didn't marry early. She married in her 30s as well, and she had me when she was in uni. And then she graduated. She studied sociology and social work, by the way. So she graduated with a 2-1. And she would say that anything, when you go to university in Nigeria, anything below a 2-1 is certificate of attendance. And that sort of, after some time, I used to think about it that really, yeah, I mean, I couldn't do less, Is either, and we all know what I mean, it's tough to make a first class, So if I cannot make a first class, I mean, I can't be getting anything, lesser than a 2-1. And so for me, it was a major, at some point I'll think about it. I don't have a child that I'm nursing. I don't have any job that I'm doing. Someone else is responsible for my education. So what will be my excuse really, to perform lesser, than what she did? So for me, she was a major influence. And I find out that most of the decisions that I made, in my interaction with people, she's also she's emotionally intelligent, So if those are some of the, qualities that I imbibed over the years, so she's one major one. And then as I grew older, Jumoke Adenawa is another one that I admired. I read all of her books, listened to all of her interviews, listened to her programs, just to be able to be like her, and just be excellent, because she's really an excellent woman. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Jeanette, we do prata on Nogra for a build kvinnoförebild som du hade när du var ung?
Ja, det är så att jag heter Jeanette Grinderfrans och Sabuni i min familj. Jag ska prata på svenska eftersom jag kommer från Kongo och engelska är inte det språket som jag brukar. Och jag kom till Sverige ganska tidigt i åldern så jag kan inte heller franska på det sättet. Ja, så svenska är mitt språk och så swahili förstås. Jo, jag har en förebild. Jag föddes i en familj med en pappa som hade 4 kvinnor. Min mamma födde mig och min syster. Och våra mamma då gick bort väldigt tidigt. Jag var typ 3 år och min syster ungefär bara 1 år gammal. Så dog hon. Eller blev mördad i Kongo. Den kvinna, min pappas andra fru, är min förebild. Den kvinnan var absolut inte utbildad i någonting alls. Och det är så i Kongo oftast att männen som har det bra oftast gifter sig med kvinnor som inte har gått i skolan. Det finns en anledning till det. Den kvinnan fostrade mig och min syster precis som sina egna barn. Hon gjorde absolut ingen skillnad på oss. Vi fick allt som hennes barn fick, som alla barnen i hushållet fick. Jag vet inte om det kom från min pappa att alla barn skulle behandlas lika, men det var 2 andra kvinnor, 3, som var lite annorlunda. Men den här kvinnan är min förebild. Hon gjorde allt för oss, för mig och min syster, till det vi är idag. Och det var jämlikt och det var rättvist, alltid. Hon har gått bort nu i 80 års ålder, men det är hon.
Love, would you like to tell us about your female role models?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up around some incredibly strong women, but I would have to say my maternal grandmother, so my mom's mom. And she was the definition of a maverick. That was somebody that was the physical manifestation of I don't care what anybody thinks about me or not. I don't think she was ever married. She was a trader, she traveled, she did her own thing. And I think the moment when I realized she was such a special woman was when we were actually watching Titanic, the movie. And there's the scene where Kate Winslet is naked and being drawn. She's lying down and Leonardo is drawing her. Most moms would be like, okay, close your eyes, go away. Grandmother was like, look at that beautiful woman. Taking up space. Look at that. And she's saying it to Yoruba, oh my lewa. You know, and you're speaking in Yoruba, right? And that, being that role model was what made me realize that you can fully show up as a woman and live life on your own terms against what society says you should be doing as a woman. So she, my mom's mom, we called her Mama Ibadan, was incredible. So she was my mother. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll be coming back to you. You've worked as a social worker and you work presently as an educator. You had the opportunity of helping unaccompanied teenagers integrate into the Swedish society. So you're more like a mentor. You had more of a mentorship role, to these people. Mm-hmm. Would you like to tell us how important it is for young people, especially women, how important it is for them to have mentors while growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it is we cannot overemphasize it because partly, oftentimes mentors are people that, especially if they're people that have gone through the same path, as the young person, they know the truth. They have also had challenges on the way and, successes. So it's important that young people have people to look up to and also learn from. There's no point making the same mistakes as someone else. So it's important that young people can be guided. So usually for the group of people that I worked with in the past, newly arrived unaccompanied minors in Sweden, and they're here. Most of them came from Afghanistan, Iran, Syria at the time, and a few from Nigeria actually, and a few African countries, So most of these people, they're lost, and some of them haven't been in school in the last, a couple of years, and boom, they found themselves in Sweden, and then the Swedish government is taking care of them. But then, how do they integrate? How do they find jobs? What are the things that they need to do to make their life count in Sweden? So it is essential that there is somebody, that can speak to them about these things and, point them in the right direction. And there is also somebody who can model, positive behaviors that they can also emulate. We know how it is in that age. Exposure to, there are quite a lot of unpleasant things in the society, social vices, drugs, gang violence and all of that. You don't want them to, because they're really not answerable to anyone. They do not have parents that are answerable to. They're all by themselves, and they have to make life decisions by themselves. So it's important that, there are good adults around them who can, point them in the right direction so that they make, right choices.
Yeah, Lola, you moved to the US as a teenager. What was it like for you?
Yes, and I actually think moving to the US before moving to Sweden, I see that as a privilege. Because I think if I had moved directly from Nigeria to Sweden, I think my outcome might have been a bit different in terms of how I approach the social problems here in Sweden. So when I moved from Nigeria to the US at 15, obviously I'm Yoruba, grounded in my culture, know where I'm from. I was moving to a society that already created a box for me. I said, you're black, this is your box, this is how you should navigate society. So in my teens, from 15 to 17, I was isolated a lot because that box was not my box, and I spent time trying to communicate that identity I'd already had, right? And so those first few years in the US were challenging for me, but that was also where the seeds for the work I do now were planted. And that seed is cultural connection. So everything I do is rooted in how do I make us understand each other better so we don't isolate each other. So when I moved to Sweden, because I had spent time, 16 years in the US, kind of understanding the culture, understanding how it moves socially and a lot of the history, coming to Sweden, I recognized a lot of those things I'd already fought against. And I always say, I found my voice in the US, moving to Sweden made me scream with that voice. When you recognize the same thing, right? Trying to push you. And so when I moved to Sweden, that was when I fully understood the difference between integration versus assimilation. So in the US, you can integrate. There's a lot of, we know there's a lot of racial tensions, but at least we talk about it. It's been spoken about. But in the US says, come as you are. As long as you share our kind of base values, we will make space for you. So that's why you can be Nigerian American, Irish American, Iraqi American. Swedish society says, you have to be like me. So leave what you're bringing. And that is an impossible ask of anybody. You cannot ask somebody to forget who they are, who they were before they came, to be like you when you also know they will never be like you. It's like a catch-22, right? So that is where my work lies, in terms of trying to get society to understand that there is a big difference between integration and assimilation. Because, I mean, think about it. Even our names have meaning. Names carry weight. But then when you come to a society that wants you to change your name so you can move ahead, it's giving you, it wants you to drop who you are as a person to be accepted, and that's like I said, it's impossible. It's an impossible ask. So that is where my work comes to play in terms of how can I foster cultural and understanding through everything I do, whether it's photography, writing, the books I write, including this one, which is a novel.
So more, so to speak, one can naturally say that the challenges you had when you were in the States helped to prepare you.
Yes.
So it was like a blessing in disguise.
That's the best blessing in disguise. That's a blessing in disguise, is that I was able to spend so much time there to see, to understand that it's one thing to live in peacefully quiet, in a quiet corner by a lake, peace of mind, nobody disturbs you. But it's another thing to say, you know what, I want to be the CEO of IKEA as a black woman. Do I have a part to that? Yeah. And that's two different social dynamics. And so moving to the US was what prepared me to move in to Sweden.
Interesting. Jeanette, du kom till Sverige som en tonåring, om jag har rätt. Hur gammal var du när du kom?
Jag var cirka 15 år.
Okej. Hur var det? Hur var känslan när du kom då? För hon berättade nu att ibland när man kom till Sverige, man måste lämna sig själv för att kunna bli något, typ som någon annan. Vilka typ av utmaningar hade du när du kom?
Jag kom som 15-åring. Vi var 4 syskon då som kom. Och jag kom på 70-talet. Och då jag kan säga att det finns en viss skillnad hur det är idag och hur det var 1977 när jag kom. Vi var inte många afrikaner i det här landet. När man träffade någon på tunnelbanan, man sprang efter den. Alltså det är sant. När man såg en svart människa där, man sprang. Vi gick och hälsade, vi kramades, vi hälsade alltid. Så var det när jag kom. Och svenskarna då, etniska svenskar, var väldigt nyfikna på oss som var svarta. Vi var inte många. Det var några gambianer, så gambianer fick komma hit utan visum på den tiden. Och man var välkommen, ganska överallt. Jag som 16-åring när jag började gymnasiet, jag fick jobb inom hemtjänst på en gång. Utan svenska språket, utan ingenting. Alla var nyfikna, jag fick gå runt till alla i hemtjänsten där i Hammarby Sjögården eller Hammarbyhöjden där. Och alla pensionärer bråkade om mig. De ville att jag ska komma dit till dem. Ja, det var så. Men nu är det tvärtom.
Man måste kunna.
Man måste kunna språket för att kunna städa golvet. Det var inte så på 70-talet.
Nej.
Det var öppet för alla.
Ja, vad bra.
För mig också. Det är så jag kom in i svenska samhället och integrationen. Och jag har fortfarande det som har drivit mig, för jag har inte mött så många andra utmaningar som de som har kommit nu möter.
Okay. Tack så mycket. She just said something about, I mean, she didn't have to learn the language. Some of us, we had to we had to struggle to learn the language. What was it like for you? Learning the language, I mean, getting a source of income and things like that.
It was a struggle. I need to admit that. Because I mean, when I came to Sweden, I came as a student, so I came to study at the time, a couple of years back, and I didn't have intentions of staying behind in Sweden. So I just wanted to study take my degree and go back to Nigeria because my job was waiting for me at the time. So I was on leave, actually leave of absence. It's called sabbatical leave. And so I had the opportunity to study Swedish on campus, but I didn't take it because I didn't need to. And then I met a young man on campus at the time, fell in love, and then boom.
The story changed.
Yes. So I'm here. And then I realized that, okay, so now plans are changing. You are going to be in Sweden. You have to learn Swedish, okay? And so I embraced it, reluctantly though, but I knew that I needed to do it because, so I used to, as a child also, I grew up in Ibadan, Oyo State, and so I remember one time like that, we were out with my dad, this was like in the 90s when we had Chicken Grotto, Chicken George, and those sort of eateries. Yeah, and I remember that we had gone in there and we saw some Chinese, and they were there, and it was really fascinating to me because they couldn't speak English. So in my mind, I'm thinking, look at these white-skinned people that they can't speak English. So I understood that if you're going to be here, I needed to learn Swedish. And so I enrolled so after I got married and all of that, and then I enrolled to start learning Swedish. And at the time I think I did the whole SFED in like 4 months, but then I could write, read and comprehend, but to communicate, it was just a struggle. And at the same time, it felt like I'd been in school all my life, I needed to work. And so I got this opportunity to intern at Scania at the time. My husband worked there, so I had spoken to a few people, and I got that opportunity, and so I went there. So, and I thought that, I can function. I was a project manager, by the way, and so I was, oh my God.
Memories surfacing.
and so at work, and the manager had told people not to speak to me in English, so I think in his world, it was helping me to learn Swedish faster or, just find my place. But it was just a complete disaster because I was so uncomfortable. It was really horrible. It was an horrible experience for me, really, because I was in a space where people will come to my project meeting that I would invite them to, send meeting invite them, I would prepare the agenda, go through the agenda of today's meeting in English, and they will start weights, and I realized that no, I am miserable. I can't be here. I haven't learned Swedish. I really need to go back and learn Swedish. But it did something for me, really, because it was at that point that I realized that, okay, there is no quick fix to this. I really needed to learn and be grounded. And so I said to myself that I do not ever want to be in any space where I will not be able to express myself in Swedish, or I will feel less of myself because of Swedish. And that was it was more like a driving force for me, really. So at the time I went back, I had to enroll again so at this time I'd done the SFED, right? So I needed to do Swedish as a second language, Svenska som andraspråk. And so I was going, and I remember that when I enrolled, I was pregnant at the time. I was going to have my daughter, now she's 10. And my teacher said to me, Margareta Olmer, I will never forget that woman. She said to me that, you seem to be like a strong woman, blah, blah, blah. But then there is no point, you're going to be on, the parental leave for 1 year, so I don't have to enroll, just take it easy. And then when the baby grows, when she's 1, when your baby goes to Förskolan, then you can move on to the next phase. I'm like, this woman doesn't know what is driving me. No, and it was interesting because so at the time I did SAS Grund, we used to call it. So I met her, it was when I was doing the SAS Grund that I met her. So when I was going to move on to SVOR, that was when she was telling me that you don't have to, you're going to have a baby. I'm like, no, I need to. And it was interesting because I had her on the 2nd of January, it was, and then the course started on the 5th. And then the one of the course, it was myself, my 2-year-old Nathaniel at the time, and the 5-year-old baby. And my husband, that went to the one of the cross. So it was that sort of struggle I
can relate. I was pregnant when I was learning Swedish, and all the hormonal imbalances. And when I started the classes, I was expecting them to speak English, to start with. That was why I was kind of fascinated when I saw that in your book. Yes. There was a guy that actually quarreled with the teacher because I was expecting them to start at least with English, but it wasn't like that. I left that class that day. I got home. I cried from Södertälje all the way to Solna. And when I got home, I told my husband, you know what? I'm leaving this country. I'm going back to Nigeria. This is not possible. But we thank God for ourselves. Here we are today. So we'll be moving on. I've read your book, In Every Mirror, She's Black. I was glued, to all the pages, and I had issues, dropping the book after being done. I could relate with some of the characters in the book, like Kemi, although my husband is not a von Luden. So can you just tell us what inspired you into being so vocal in describing some of the characters, the experiences of some of the characters in your book? Because we know these things exist, yes, but we are not all so bold to come out to, talk about them. So what was the motivation for you?
And remember I said about the screaming when I got to Sweden is because when you recognize a lot of the injustices in society, it creates that voice to want to voice and make sure other people feel seen, that you're not alone. And then the voice gets stronger when you get to Sweden because it's like, I've dealt with this in a stronger environment. So when I came here, doing the same thing, trying to integrate, learning the language, I have a broad network of lots of different Black women across different parts of society, from refugees to like the 1%, a range. And I started realizing that their stories aren't being told. I don't see their stories in a contemporary way. There are lots of contemporary writers, but we usually write about just Africa or or maybe the US, but where is the story of the Black experience, especially the Black immigrant experience in Sweden, and the diversity in that experience? Because not everybody is a refugee, right? And so I knew I wanted to tackle 3 things. Before the characters came, I knew I wanted to tackle career, class, and culture. Career, because we know how difficult it is to get a job in Sweden, even if you're the most qualified person in the room. We know that. Class, because it's still a very classist society. People don't ask you what you do, they ask you where do you live.
Where do you live?
Where do you live? Just to get and then culture, because over the last couple of years, they asked me, especially during the between 2013 to 2016, there was a large influx of refugees because of what happened in the wars. And so culture, we know there is now some cultural clashes because of integration versus assimilation, 2 different things. So that was why I created Kemi to handle career, Brittany to handle class, and Muna to handle culture. But there are also 3 Black women. Sweden is not number 1 on our list of places to move to, independently, with no reason. so even though trust me, I really love this country. That's why I do this work, right? But something has to bring the 3 women to Sweden for the book to not be fantasy, for it to be rooted in reality. And that's why I created Yoni's character, Yoni von. Yes, because then work can bring Kemi, love can bring Brittany, and then kind of the asylum situation can bring Muna.
Let me cut you short. I was expecting a sort of a happy ending,
yes,
like the two black women being pals and friends, but I was disappointed.
Yes.
They even quarreled.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So I was at that time I was like, what's she trying to
Yes.
explain? I understand that we don't all have to be friends.
Yes.
Do you understand? But do you think we are doing enough for ourselves as a black community?
Correct. So I did that by, like, this book was very intentional in everything I did, right? So the reason I didn't make Kemi and Brittany friends is to show that black people are individuals as well and need to be afforded the privilege of being treated as an individual. So that if you, Angela, makes a mistake, they don't say, well, you know how all black women are, right? Or if I wake up and I'm just not having a good day, you say, well, you know, all black women, they can be bitchy. You know? So that is what I wanted to do, is create 3 very distinct women, put them side by side, so that at the end of the book, they are so distinct that you see them as people, individual people, you know. And that is what I always say, that the white community or just white people, they have that privilege of being treated as the lone wolf, you know, or when they shoot up something, or the oh, you know, E was or E. But if it's a black person, the entire,
They're all like that.
they're all like that. And the black diaspora, the black community is so diverse, from the Caribbean to Africa to all over. That's to kind of clump everybody in is a disservice to the richness of our diversity. So that's why I did it that way.
That's very good.
Yes.
Yes, well, we don't have enough time, so I'm going to be skipping some of the questions I have. You have a very young family.
Yes.
Emily's just about 10,
11,
she's going to be 11, and your work involves, I'm sure it involves a lot of traveling in and out of town.
Yes.
How has it been coping with, taking care of your family, and then, you have a fantastic career.
Yes.
So how have you been able to cope?
I think once you find your purpose in life, you have to create the support systems to make sure you are living that purpose in life. I think this is not a question that you will ask a man. So I want to just say that this is not a question that if it was a man, you would ask. But it's the societal constructs that we've built to say this is what women should be doing. And that's why my maternal grandmother is my icon. Because she was the embodiment of, this is my part in life. I can be all of those things. I can create the support system I need. Even my kids, I just got back with my daughter. We're just traveling to Amsterdam and Paris. I take them with me. I show them the world. I work as a travel photographer and a travel writer. And so it's showing them that you can live a life that's much broader than what society says you need to be living. You know, so that's what I've done, and that is why I live the life I do.
Yeah,
as well.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I sometimes still deal with the guilt of not being always present because of what I do.
Yes.
I don't do most of the drop-offs, and my husband does that, thankfully. And sometimes I'm not always present for their games, their activities, at times some of their developmental talk. But I try to. I know it's kind of better here in Sweden because the society affords you the opportunity of doing that. But the truth is, certain things would definitely have to wait, So I still deal with that guilt, and I think most people do. So what advice do you have for women dealing with such guilt?
I think first of all, you need to identify who is projecting the guilt on you and where that is coming from. Right? because it can be a lot of projections. And kids are also very observant. All right? So they can see a mother that sits there morning to night, not living a life or living a truth, and kind of building a resentment because this is what she has to do. Versus your children seeing that this is my incredible mom. She's not only a mom, but she's a woman first, right? And they see kind of the example you are setting, saying that you can be all of that. And you said it in your speech, I'm a wife, a mother, all of that, in addition to being an incredible doctor, right? Incredible, with your degrees and stuff. So I think that's what we need to do, is show our children the multi-diverse layers of what it is to be a woman.
Not just a mother.
Exactly. And the guilt, obviously we can arrange our time to make sure that the events that we need to be there, we're there for them. Kids will know when you're there for them, right?
They do.
Yeah. So, and also, I think one thing we've done as a society, and I guess it's cultural, so I cannot say it broadly, but is that sometimes we give men applause for the bare minimum. Right? And it's not to minimize what guys do. So if your husband is dropping off or doing something for the kids, we are like, oh, look at the dad is pushing the kid in the stroller, amazing.
It's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing, but it's bare minimum. When you step back and look at it, you're like, well, wait a minute.
It's not supposed to.
That is bare minimum, because I not only do that, then you walk, then you cook dinner, then you do other things, right? So it's, this is not something that can be solved in this lifetime, but I am confident in this generation in terms of gender equity, in terms of the intersectionality of it all, to say that women, our roles are more expansive. We can push strollers and also be CEOs. And that's why I really loved it, where I think it was the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, when she had a baby and she was there in the parliament with the baby. It was a clear message to say, I can be both. So.
Jeanette, får jag bara fråga dig. Vi kvinnor, ibland har vi skuldkänsla av att vi har inte tillräckligt tid för barn. Vilket råd skulle du ge kvinnor som har sådana känslor på grund av deras arbete, att de inte har tillräckligt tid? Det är kanske lite bättre här i Sverige, men vilket råd ska du ge dem? Eller ge oss?
Ja, råd. Jag tror att majoriteten av alla kvinnor, även i västvärlden, även i Afrika, fightas med skuldkänslor. Och vi i Sverige särskilt, att man hinner inte med sina barn alltid då. Men det tycker jag att vi ska slippa. Vi ska inte gå runt och ha skuldkänslor hela tiden. Antingen är man 2 i ett hushåll, eller så är man ensam. Och är man ensam, då ska man sortera vad det som är viktigt, vad som inte är så viktigt. Jag kanske inte behöver just städa. Mitt hus behöver inte skina rent för att någon skulle kunna komma, eller för någon granne skulle säga någonting om mig. Vi måste kunna sortera det. Och att är man 2 stycken, ska man dela lika. Man ska inte göra allt det där.
Kan man dela lika? För
det
jag tror
inte
inte
vara
att det
lika.
funkar.
Men man ska komprimera varandra. Man ska kunna göra saker samtidigt som jag gör någonting annat. Och inte det där, jag måste städa, jag måste laga mat, och mannen sitter där. Det ska vi ge fan i. Det ska vi sluta med. Det är det enda. För tiden, det är den tiden vi har. Vi har bara 24 timmar om dygnet. Och vi har inget mer. Och barnen kräver alltid sin tid. Och barnen kommer ju först.
Tack så mycket. Vi ska prata nu om din bok, Sawako. Jag har inte läst den, men jag har inte hunnit läsa den. Men jag lovar att jag kommer göra det. Det handlar mycket om familjeförhållande. Och du vet att årets kvinnorsdagsfirande har tema att uppmuntra till rättsvishet, embracing equity. Vad betyder rättsvishet i din värld?
Rättvist. Ja, det är jämställdhet som du hade som titel också. Vi ska omfamna våra egna, vad heter det? Nu kommer jag inte ihåg equity. Omfamna egna, vad heter equity på svenska?
Är det inte rättvist?
Rättvisa, ja. Min bok då, Sawako, handlar om en flicka som nu är vuxen och skriver till sitt barnbarn som inte är född ännu. Och den här boken borde alla afrikanska männen läsa. Den här boken borde alla afrikanska kvinnor läsa. För var och en kommer känna igen sig i den här boken. Det handlar om samhället, i våra afrikanska samhällen, som är inte jämlika och som är orättvisa, alltid. Och det är den här boken handlar om. Det är en roman som utspelar sig i Kongo, östra Kongo. Och alla som känner till Kongo vet vad som händer där i den delen av landet.
Okay, tack så mycket. Lola, back to you. What's your take on the perception of equity and equality amongst people of color, starting, with the family and then the society on a broader scale?
So, in terms of equity, I think, and I'll only speak, to my own cultural background, Yoruba, where Nigeria is such a dichotomy, right? In that it's very patriarchal, it's like kind of male-dominated, but then also women are very powerful, in terms of historically being traders, So it's one of those kind of dichotomies. But I think when I think of equity within a household, African household, it's that not one thing is not designated for the woman to do versus the man to do, right? That the woman can also support the man, that these kind of roles, what they do is they make people unhappy, right? So find what makes you in your relationship happy in terms of the dynamics. Now in society, in terms of equity, because again, kind of living here in Sweden, when they have that discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they mean equality for white and women. That's where we are right now, in terms of that discussion. And so there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, because there is the intersection. There is gender equality, but then within gender equality, what about for brown and black women in that discussion? And that discussion is not being had, I would say, theoretically, like not yet enough, at this stage. So yeah, and so that's kind of my position.
I think you've answered the next question I have on my list. I want to ask you, how do you think people of color are faring in Sweden when it comes to inclusion and equity and equality?
Yeah, it's and I want to talk about the language again, because I do speak Swedish, but there is language privilege and language prejudice, right? So Sweden wants you to be fluent in Swedish so you can assimilate quicker, right? But then you get a different kind of treatment because you're speaking Swedish with an accent. And so I know a lot of African Americans that have lived here close to 20 years that do not speak one word of Swedish by choice, because of that treatment. So that's why they speak, because we're already marginalized in society, so they feel like I need to keep one card that would make me get treated in some way with some more dignity. And so they hold on to that English and they speak the American English, and that gets a little bit of
and it works for them.
But and I address all of this in the book, because Muna is the most fluent in Swedish. She does everything she needs to do, but still can't get where she needs to be. Whereas Britney has a private Swedish teacher.
She didn't even bother.
She didn't bother.
And that was the main cause of the fight between herself and
Kemi.
Kemi, because Kemi struggles to learn and she didn't.
So you see what I'm saying? So there is also levels of privilege within the language discussion as well.
Yeah. I dealt with that as well. Initially, I used to be very conscious about how do I sound, I don't want to sound. But after some time, I was like, I mean, if I go ham or create, but you know, I don't care anymore.
Absolutely.
So long as I'm making sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing I just want to add, just on a personal note, that even though I speak Swedish and, you know, I don't call myself fluent, even though I speak it well, because I'm a storyteller and I write English with nuance. And so until I get to that level of nuance in Swedish, I will always feel like I'm not there. So I can speak it, people I think, oh, you're fluent enough. No, because I need to be able to speak it with the exact same nuance and precision I do with English. So that's kind of my own. So everybody has their own different.
Yeah, so let's move forward. Now we'll be talking about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I love her.
Yes.
She wrote a book, We All Should Be Feminists. Allah Bodevara Feminists. Am I right? Yeah. Jeanette, vad tror du om den här feminism? Säger man så på svenska ju. Att alla får vara feminist. Tror du att alla, för det finns vissa kvinnor som vill inte att du ska säga att de gillar inte ordet. Men ska alla vara feminist? Vad betyder feminist? Att vara feminist, vad betyder det?
Ja, feminism för mig betyder jämlikhet och rättvis. Betyder feminism. I ett samhälle som inte är ofeministiskt, det är hårda samhällen. Jag tror att i Sverige, nu pratar jag om Sverige, det är ändå det är feministiskt. Det är därför det här landet fungerar. Och de länderna som inte har den idén, som inte anammat det, de fungerar inte så bra. Jag kommer från Kongo, där jag tror inte ens männen vet betydelse av att vara feminist. För att om man skulle säga till en kongolesisk man att du är feminist, då har man nog den insult på engelska. För de förknippar det med någonting annat.
Men det är ingenting fel att vara feminist?
Nej, absolut inte. Det är inget fel att vara feminist. Och jag tror att om våra samhällen i Afrika kunde acceptera det och skapa feminism i hela samhället, jag tror samhällena skulle fungera lite bättre.
Tack. Do you think Chimamanda was right with her postulation about we all should be feminists, irrespective of gender?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe and I think that, I share that view as well. I think that everyone should be feminist. And I think that we really need to, people talk about, that the way to go is to raise our boys better, but I believe that we should raise our children better, regardless of gender. I think that, equal opportunities for everyone, see the human being first, before you define somebody as male or female, so I believe that everyone should be.
Thank you. Lola, would you love to be called one?
Oh, I am already one. I mean, I think the way I live my life already kind of shows that. But I think there are so many interpretations of the word and definitions. That's why people are not rallying around it. Some people, because they feel like being feminist is anti-being male or anti-being masculine.
It's like a competition.
Exactly, and it's not. No. It's actually not. And so it's a matter of trying to communicate that message in that it's actually, on the contrary, it means you are actually so secure in your masculinity that you are not threatened by a woman living in a power or standing in a power. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we would like to hear from the audience. I'm sure people have questions and contributions and inputs.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I'll ask my question in English because I can say. My question is for you, Miss Lola, and Miss Obayemi. I'm a teacher as well, and my question comes from working with students who are newly arrived to Sweden or have been in the country for a while but don't feel Swedish, and they strongly stand in their identity that they are not Swedish. They are Syrian or from their home country, and they don't really feel a part of this kind of new world to them. So my kind of question brings in the two things that you are both kind of passionate about, education, but also you're finding your voice.
Yeah.
And this kind of dilemma between assimilation and integration. Thank you. So to kind of cut it short, so how do you recommend parents and teachers can support minority students here in Sweden who are facing this internal battle of trying to assimilate or feeling forced to assimilate when their culture isn't represented in their school or in their community? And what do you suggest, what tools are available for them to kind of empower teachers who are in the minority, trying to support them, but also their parents as well, who also want their children to retain their identity as well? Thank you.
If I had the right answer, I'll probably be like Prime Minister and everything in Sweden. But again, it comes down to, first of all, letting the students feel seen in whatever identity they feel most comfortable in, right? Once they feel seen in that, then it's a matter of saying you don't have to give up something to be something else. You can be both. And that is the conversation that needs to be fostered on a ministry level, on a higher level, is you can be both. And that is the problem that's the cultural problem right now. It's like you have to be one or the other. And I tackled this in the book with some of the characters. You have to be either Gambian or Swedish. And it's only just the last few years that, for example, the organization and saying, you know what, I'm Afro-Swedish. That's who I am. And so starting with that conversation of just letting them know you don't have to feel Swedish, you can be both. You can adopt some Swedish values, you have your own, and then it's an organic process individually. I met a lady recently who was born and raised in Sweden. She's black. She does not consider herself Swedish. Born and raised here, speak fluent. She says, I am African first. And so it's okay to let people feel like where I want to identify is not an affront to the other side. It's more of, this is where I feel fully seen. This is where I feel at home. And I just wanted to add one more thing, because when people always ask, what does home mean to you? Home is any space or place where I don't feel I need to explain my existence. Where I can just be without having to explain why I'm in that space. So that's where our approach it, not from a pedagogy kind of, to be from that, like wherever you feel seen and you feel comfortable, just start with that, and it's not an affront to the other.
All right. So in addition to what she has said, I will say that, it's important that, the students are seen, and then that you also acknowledge that I see you, I know that this is your identity, as much as you're trying to also acquire, this new identity and identify with, Swedish and all of that. But also, I believe that, there has to be a level of communication with the parents, and so openness as to, values are values regardless of what language you speak, and so identifying those values and, standing by them. And also, I know that in Sweden we have modersmålsundervisning and these students have studiehandledning, and so I think that sort of teaming up also with the students, with the kids and studiehandledare, can also go a long way. And so I've also been there, having worked as a student handler there myself. I know that oftentimes the teachers seem to be, they're always like too busy, and then, so they don't have enough time to interact with you and to give you enough information that you need as a student handler to be able to help this kid, in the kid's first language or language of instruction that they've had previously. So I think that has to be strengthened. It has to be deepened, because if we want to create inclusion in our schools, we can't do these things in isolation. So we have to do it together with the parents and the student handler that the system has already provided. So that way we're going to be able to reach out to the kids a lot better.
Thank you very much. I think we have
thank you so much. My name is Joe France. I must say that I'm extremely proud of you and very, very honored to be part of this afternoon's discussion, to be listening to you. Now, a number of things, reflection that I have as sitting down, and I think I'd like to say that I missed you talking about the young boys and the men. I heard about the men, of course, in the polygamous home that Janet talked about, and about the others, but I think what you're talking about is about power and about representation, about growth and about the future. And if we as a society, if we are going to be able to change anything and make the next generation of Africans living in Sweden and Afro-Swedish kids feel at home, as you said rightly, feel comfortable here, then they need to be able to take care of their destiny. They need to be able to navigate and represent themselves and ensure that they have the power to do that. I'm quite positive in a sense, because if you look historically, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, Sweden was one of the most poorest nations in Europe. Most people migrated to the US. Today it's one of the richest. 20 years ago, the discussion in Sweden was that we will never be part of NATO, that modular nuclear stations will never be built. It's changed now. So things change. Depends upon what we do to change that. We need to be focused. And I think that as people of African descent living in Sweden, wanting to be part of the society and wanting to build that, we also need to recognize that we need to take responsibility for our own destiny. It's about the young boys. We talk about feminism, and I've been part of a group of people who actually very actively developed the concept of a feminist foreign policy. And what does that mean? Of course, it means, in Swedish, you would say delaktighet. It means egg and makt, power. And it also means rights-based approach. And very aptly you said value-based, value-based. And that's what we need to do. I would not like to go on, but what I wanted to say is that the discussion is very, very great, it's good, but we need to recognize that it's about power, it's about delaktighet, as we say in Swedish, it's about the context, and also we need to make sure that, look, we are here to stay. Our kids are here to stay, and our children are here to stay.
Thank you very much. We have room for just 2 more questions because of time. Yes, sorry?
I really don't have a question, I just wanted to contribute a little bit. My name is Linda Emenike. I've lived in Sweden now for 30 years. And we have seen it all. physical disrespect, verbal disrespect, looking for jobs, being asked. I was asked, what do you think if you go out? Do you think, well, how do you see yourself when you go out? Do you think yourself as a black person? And I was looking for a job, and it was my first job. And then everybody that knows me knows maybe what I would say. And then I said, I don't think of myself going out as a black person. And then she now asked, if you're treated by somebody because of your color, what will you do? And then I said, of course, I'll give it back to the person. Because I'm not going to go home to cry, the person will cry. But looking back after that question, it followed me, it has followed me all the way. But you know, my advice to the young women that are here, whatever, believe in yourself, stand for yourself, put the best in everything that you do. The Swedish people, they will see that in you. Eventually, it will speak for you. Because the best place, actually, I've not gone to so many countries, but there are opportunities in this country. But they need to say the best. I won't say they are bad though, because that's how they built this society. That's why we're living here. So put the best in what you're doing. Don't think that, oh, because Swedish people, everybody's running like that, oh, viska fika. And then you're following the fika. You're just, they'll be the one to just crucify you. But when you put the best into what you're doing, I mean, I'm a nurse, I work in health sector. We have been told don't touch me. I don't want to have anything to do with people like you. And then I say, okay, it wasn't like that from the beginning, but now I can say, you know what? I told the patient, I said, well, you know what? Everybody's here complaining. You even said about race, so now with it, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to unmail you. And then he said, what? Unmail and patient. And I said, of course. They are best caller. But at the end, I told her, look at, because it's a patient, needs me. And then I said, if you just change your mentality, I will take good care of you. You will never forget. And that's what happened. And I took care of him, and we took care of him, because in the world we are all, they cannot change that now. Sweden, if you say a black person or a foreigner will not take care of you, then you are in trouble. Because everywhere we are the one that's there.
Thank you very much.
So believe in yourself, put the best in what you're doing. Never allow yourself to put down. My chief once told me that I've never seen a black woman that can make her voice heard. And then I said, hey, you made the wrong one. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lola, you have something.
No, absolutely, I would definitely need to take a question if we can. But I listen, I hear you completely, I see you completely. There's also some danger in that. Whereas just we're not enough. Everything you do will never be enough. Because we feel like we have to please a certain gaze. So yes, put the best in all you do, show up as your best, but remember, it has to be for you. Otherwise, that gaze will keep moving the goalposts. They keep moving the goalposts. And there is a Swedish proverb that says, Den djupaste brunnen kan också tömmas. The deepest well can also be dried. So we are not these bottomless wells of strength that keeps going and doing and doing. We need to be taken care of mentally, emotionally, and physically. We do not have to keep moving our words. That's what I wanted to add.
And just one more question.
Thank you very much. My name is Vida. Thank you very much, panelists, for a very important day as we celebrate women. I just want to sound a reflection on, we are talking about us and the people who had gone before us, but there's a critical development now concerning the children in this society. Just this past month, I have a friend who complained she actually discussed that she has 2 kids who have consistently been saying that they want to change their color. A kid, one is 5 years, one is 10 years, they go to 2 different schools. And the mother is devastated, she doesn't know what to do. So how are we going to address this issue where we we empower our children? And because they are young, how do we do it? This needs to be done, and I'm happy that we have a lot of educational and people in pedagogy, in education here. This is, I think, the most critical issue that we have to address to empower the children wherever they are and then build on so that they don't have to walk the same tough path that we are describing. Thank you.
The question goes, because there are a lot of powerful women here, and when we start to step into big spaces, I have a very critical question I believe I'm dealing with at the moment. Did you deal with imposter syndrome, and how did you handle it?
Well, I do want to quickly talk to Vida about the color issue, and that is where we need to change the messaging of saying, do everything you can so you are enough. That is a big, and that was why I answered the last question that way, because that is a big thing for me too. I'm also raising kids here and already building their self-confidence and saying they are enough, they do not have to be something else to be accepted. That is the messaging that we need to keep. Society is not giving them that message because society wants them to assimilate. And society is predominantly white. So if you want me to assimilate as opposed to integrate, assimilation means you have to be like me. That's where that messaging is coming from. That's where they want to change. So we have to collectively start changing the messaging of the kids and say, how are we going to do that? If they say, I want to be different, you say why. And then keep questioning why. And say, well, why don't you like this? Why don't you like your hair? So that they can tell you how they are feeling. And then from there is when you'll be able to choose the right words. Example. So I can give you an example. Gratefully, my kids haven't said that they wanted to change. But one example I gave recently was like, think about an egg. There are many colors of eggs, right? Brown eggs, white eggs. But when you boil them and you open them up, what's inside? It's the same. That is another way of talking to smaller kids to say, oh, everybody is different, but we're still the same inside, and we taste as good. Those eggs taste the same, right? So just enforcing that with them.
All right, just to add to that, I also want to say that, I understand that the kids that I'm talking about now, they're 5 and 10, but then I think we can do better with the babies that we're raising now. And so I think that as adults, we have to be proud of who we are. We have to be proud of our identity to start with, and be vocal about it as well. So, and then, so be proud of your language as well. And so we're also talking about a lot of African languages going into extinction, and we really need to identify with our culture. There is no two way about it. And so if we have been doing all of this, I think that, the challenges will be minimal. So like she said, that's a way to deal with children that are already grown, but then I think that we can start to build the younger ones from now so that we're not going to find ourselves in that situation.
Nej, det tänker jag tycker inte vi gillar.
The imposter syndrome.
Okay. Imposter syndrome, you are always going to fight that. Everybody, regardless of color. Regardless of color, fights imposter syndrome. Because that is just a human, natural response to say, can I do this? But you can. So that is a voice in your head. That even the most talented person, anybody fights it, because we are looking at what will other people say. How are they judging us? How are they going to review what we're doing? And so we are usually the toughest critics on ourselves. And that's why one of my favorite quotes is, carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man, right? Once you carry yourself with that confidence, imposter syndrome is nothing. Right? But you're always, remember, it's always going to be that voice in your head. but try and push it away and say, you know what, I can do it. It's just society projecting, telling me to work twice as hard. I don't have to work twice as hard. I have to show up with my best, what I can. And then the last quote I wanted to share was, somebody said, if you have 40% today, and you give 40% energy, you've given 100%. So you have to be gracious with yourself as well. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So our panelists, can we give them a round of applause? That was a very enlightening session. Thank you so much.